How did the poker game held in room 349 of Park Central Hotel in the heart of New York lead to the death of the most powerful gambling boss in the United States? Why did the tension between four men sitting at the table on the night of November 4th, 1928, result in only one of them surviving?
November 4th, 1928, Sunday evening. In the heart of Manhattan, Arnold Rothstein, one of the most dangerous men in the city, was walking toward room 349 on the 12th floor of the towering Park Central Hotel, about to live the final hours of his life. Outside, the autumn wind howled through the streets of New York, while the crystal chandeliers in the hotel lobby illuminated the richest and most dangerous people of the era. Arnold Rothstein, 46 years old, was the most powerful gambling boss in the United States, known by the nickname The Brain. This man was not only the mastermind of the gambling world, but also the brain behind the darkest dealings of the Prohibition era. Rothstein's hand was in everything from the 1919 World Series scandal to Manhattan's biggest bootlegging operations. The poker game to be held at Park Central Hotel tonight would be one of the biggest bets of his life. In the corridors of the hotel's 12th floor, the carpets were so thick that footsteps could not be heard, only the distant jazz music and occasional laughter ringing like bells echoed. As Rothstein walked through this silent corridor in his expensive Italian shoes, he felt the cold metal of the Smith & Wesson pistol he carried in the inner pocket of his jacket. The most important rule he had learned in his 40 years of life was this: in this world of New York, he should never trust anyone. When he opened the door to room 349, the cigarette smoke and whiskey smell inside greeted him. In the center of the room, a poker table covered with green felt was illuminated by the most expensive lamp of the era. 3 more men sat around the table: George McManus, Titanic Thompson, and Nigger Nate Raymond. In front of each of them were money and poker chips stacked high. George McManus, in his 40s, was a broad-shouldered Irishman, having grown up on Manhattan's West Side. This man, who had known the rules of the streets since childhood, was now one of the city's biggest gambling organizers. McManus's gray eyes always looked cold and sharp, like an accountant calculating. In tonight's game, which was his organization, there was a total of $350,000 on the table, a fortune for that time. Titanic Thompson was a professional gambler and con artist who spoke with a southern accent. This man, whose real name was Alvin Clarence Thomas, had earned this nickname for winning a bet about the sinking of the Titanic. Thompson's hands, shaped by years of poker experience, shuffled cards with such mastery that sometimes viewers thought they were mesmerized. The third man at the table was Nigger Nate Raymond, Harlem's most renowned black gambler. This man, whose real name was Nathan Raymond, had earned himself a respected place in white gambling circles, despite the racial discrimination of the era. Raymond's poker talent was so famous that even Manhattan's wealthiest white businessmen did not hesitate to share a table with him. When Rothstein sat at the table, the lights of Manhattan were visible through the room's windows. Below, the neon lights of Broadway were flashing on and off. Cars were passing by honking their horns. This energy of the city intensified the tense atmosphere inside the room even more. Rothstein's lover, Inez Norton, sat in the armchair in the corner of the room, watching the game with a whiskey glass in her hand. Inez Norton, 28 years old, was one of the most beautiful women in Manhattan, with her platinum blonde hair and green eyes. Her relationship with Rothstein had been going on for 2 years, and this relationship was the subject of city gossip because Rothstein was married. Inez had noticed something different in her lover's behavior tonight. Normally cold-blooded when playing poker, her lover kept looking at his watch tonight, his fingers drumming impatiently on the table. The game had started at 8 o'clock in the evening. In the first hours, the cards were flowing normally, and the bets were staying at reasonable levels. However, as the night progressed, the amount of money on the table began to increase. Rothstein was playing bigger bets than he had ever played before. He lost $50,000 in one hand, then won $100,000 in the next. As midnight approached, the atmosphere at the table had become increasingly tense. The sweat droplets on McManus's forehead sparkled in the lamplight. Titanic Thompson's usual confident smile had given way to a worried expression. Nigger Nate Raymond was taking deep breaths every time he revealed his cards, as if he was making the most important decision of his life. Rothstein's poker style that night surprised even friends who had known him for many years. This man who had earned the nickname the Brain would normally calculate every move mathematically. However, tonight, as if he were someone else, he was playing with his intuition. Inez Norton, watching her lover from her corner armchair, noticed that his hands were trembling. When the clock showed 12:15 at midnight, a critical hand developed at the table. Rothstein had a pair of aces in his hand, while McManus had 3 nines. The bet rose to $150,000, the biggest hand to be played that night. As Rothstein put his cards on the table, he said, "My luck is running good tonight." George's voice was different from his normally cold and calculating tone, a bit drunk, too. When McManus revealed his cards, everyone at the table held their breath. 3 nines beat Rothstein's pair of aces. However, instead of paying the $150,000 he had lost, Rothstein said, "This money will be paid tomorrow, not today." McManus's gray eyes turned ice cold. In Manhattan's gambling world, paying the money you played immediately was the most basic unwritten rule. "Arnold, this business doesn't work like that," McManus said, his voice increasing the tension in the room even more. "You will pay your money now, or you won't be able to leave this table." Rothstein looked at McManus and realized that he felt real fear for the first time in years. However, he had not earned the nickname the Brain for nothing. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and said, "George, I will pay this money tomorrow. You know me, I keep my word." Titanic Thompson and Nigger Nate Raymond were caught in the middle of this tension. Both men knew how similar tensions in Manhattan's gambling world ended. Thompson put the cards in his hand on the table and muttered, "Gentlemen, maybe that's enough for tonight." However, McManus had stood up. The Irish gambling boss, although 3 years younger than Rothstein, was much more powerful physically. Having grown up on the streets of the West Side, he knew very well how to make his fists talk. "Arnold, this money will be paid now. You won't be able to leave here any other way." Inez Norton jumped up from her armchair in the corner. "Arnold, please, let's go. That's enough for tonight," she said. Her voice was trembling with fear. Rothstein's lover did not know the reason why he had played such a big bet, but she understood that things were going badly. Rothstein looked at his lover, then at the 3 men at the table. "Am I ever seen going back on my word in this city?" he said. However, the tremor in his voice showed that he too understood the seriousness of the situation. McManus began to pace around the table. "Arnold, your reputation doesn't count in this business. The money will be paid now, or you won't be able to leave this room." It was 12:35 at midnight. There was no sound in the hotel corridors. Only the distant jazz music and occasionally ringing laughter could be heard. The tension inside the room had now intensified to the point where it was impossible to breathe. Rothstein felt the pistol in the inner pocket of his jacket. However, he knew that McManus was also armed. Titanic Thompson and Nigger Nate Raymond were standing at the edge of the table like 2 men who did not know what to do. Meanwhile, Inez Norton noticed the change in her lover's face. Rothstein's eyes, which were normally ice cold, were now burning like angry coals. Inez did not know the real reason why he had played such a big bet, but the changes she had noticed in Rothstein's behavior in recent weeks now made sense. Her lover had been unable to sleep at night recently, constantly making phone calls, sometimes even leaving the house at midnight. "Arnold, please end this business," Inez whispered, but only Rothstein could hear her voice. "Let's leave here. I have a bad feeling inside." Rothstein glanced at his lover. He knew how strong Inez's intuition was. This woman had saved him from several dangerous situations before, but this time was different. This time there was no place to escape. As McManus continued to pace around the table, he stopped in front of the window. The city lights coming from below created strange shadows on his face. Arnold, you are the smartest man in this city, but sometimes intelligence is not enough. Sometimes power is needed. Titanic Thompson broke his silence. Gentlemen, maybe we can solve this business differently. Arnold, can't you pay this money in installments? McManus gave Thompson an angry look. This business is none of your concern, Titanic. It's between Arnold and me. Nigger Nate Raymond began to arrange the chips on the table. His hands were trembling. This man who had grown up on the streets of Harlem knew very well how to smell danger. Gentlemen, that's enough for tonight. Tomorrow everything will look clearer. However, McManus seemed to have lost his patience. He took another step toward Rothstein. Arnold, no one in this city plays games with me with such a big debt. You won't either. Rothstein stood up. Despite being 46 years old, he was still a physically strong man. George, who are you to tell me what I can do? I have been gambling in this city since before you were born. George, you will get this money tomorrow, Rothstein said, his voice now taking on a threatening tone. You know me, I keep my word. McManus approached Rothstein. The distance between the two men was now less than a meter. Arnold, this business will be finished tonight. There is no other way. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Everyone in the room froze. The voice at the door belonged to the hotel's security guard. Gentlemen, there's a complaint. The noise is too loud. McManus looked at the door, then at Rothstein. This business is not finished, Arnold. Tomorrow evening at 9 o'clock, you will be here again. I will get my money. Rothstein nodded. Okay, George, I will be here tomorrow evening. But both of them knew that this story would not end like this. In Manhattan's gambling world, such a big debt and such a big tension usually ended badly. Inez Norton took Rothstein's arm. Arnold, let's go now. Rothstein looked at his lover, then at the three men at the table. See you tomorrow evening, gentlemen. As he left the room, Rothstein heard McManus's voice behind him. Arnold, I will get my money tomorrow evening. There is no other way. As they went down in the elevator, Inez Norton held her lover's hand. Arnold, something was different tonight. You never played so riskily. Rothstein looked at Inez. This woman really knew him very well. Inez, sometimes a man needs to play big bets. Tonight was such a night. But why, Arnold? Why did you take such a big risk? Rothstein did not answer. How could he tell his lover about the threats he had received in recent weeks? How could he explain the tensions he had experienced with rival gangs? The man who had earned the nickname The Brain had used his heart instead of his brain this time. This had put him in great danger. As they left the hotel lobby, Rothstein looked at the street. The neon lights of Broadway were flashing on and off as always, but tonight they seemed different to him. It was as if these lights were saying goodbye to him. Inez Norton took Rothstein's arm. Arnold, you will handle this business tomorrow, won't you? Rothstein looked at his lover and lied for the first time. Of course, I will handle it. Don't worry. However, a voice inside him was saying that he should not go to Park Central Hotel tomorrow evening. But Arnold Rothstein was a man who had never gone back on his word in his entire life. He would go to that room tomorrow evening too. However, both of them knew that this story would not end like this. In Manhattan's gambling world, such a big debt and such a big tension usually ended badly. Inez Norton took Rothstein's arm. Arnold, let's go now. Rothstein looked at his lover, then at the three men at the table. See you tomorrow evening, gentlemen. As he left the room, Rothstein heard McManus's voice behind him. Arnold, I will get my money tomorrow evening. There is no other way. The next day, on the evening of November 5th, 1928, at exactly 9 o'clock, Arnold Rothstein went to room 349 of Park Central Hotel again. However, this time, he would be found covered in blood on the hotel stairs at the end of the night. The Brain, Manhattan's most powerful gambling boss, had lost the biggest bet of his life. New York police, Detective Patrick Flood, who investigated the incident, was a 45-year-old, experienced Irish-American police officer. Flood knew Manhattan's gambling world very well and understood that Rothstein's death was not just due to a gambling debt. This murder would be one of the most complex cases of the Prohibition era. Rothstein's death would remain one of the biggest mysteries in the gambling and organized crime history of the United States. McManus would never be convicted of this murder, but Manhattan's gambling world would never be the same again.
This bloody night in room 349 of Park Central Hotel was not just the failure to pay a gambling debt, but also the closing of an era. Rothstein's death caused the loss of the most powerful brain of the Prohibition era. This event went down in history as one of the most mysterious murders in the organized crime history of the United States. What really happened in room 349 that night, and why was McManus never caught? These questions still have not been fully answered.